Hey guys, coming in for Flesh and Bone, episode 4, Boogie Dark, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode, especially after the cliffhanger in the last episode, and, like I said, the last episode was my least favorite so far, but this was the best one. I think this is definitely the best of the 4 that we've had. I absolutely loved this episode. This was a really great character episode. There's just some really great character moments this episode. We really get a lot of the necessary character development we need with these characters, and there was some really fantastic scenes in this episode that I definitely really loved, and I thought they were really great overall. This is probably the episode that has really hooked me on the show. Like, I've been enjoying the show, but this is the episode where I'm like, you know what? I think this is actually a very good miniseries, and I think they're doing a very good job. We are halfway through the miniseries at this point. I can't believe it, but yeah, like I said, there's only 8 episodes, so we're halfway through, and I absolutely loved it. But let's just get into it. Lots to talk about. This is probably my longest review that I've had of this show so far, but let's get into it. So we see right away the Boogie Dark means term used by soldiers to describe total darkness found at night, a blackness that devours lights, and that term, the darkness, is brought up several times in this episode. It really is to do with Claire's darkness, and we'll get into that. We see Bryan and Claire, they both wake up, and she tells him he needs to go. Bryan says as Claire comes in, and he says to hang on a sec, but she's not interested. She says she's going to be late. He says he came 400 miles on a fucking bus, and now he can't even listen to what he has to, and now she can't even listen to what he has to say. She says to stop, and then he says stop, and then Mia comes in, and Claire says she's leaving. She has class and rehearsal, and he says he gets it, and he says he'll be here when she gets back, and she says he won't. She means if she wants him gone, she means it, and she wants him gone. Which again, we don't know everything that Bryan's done to her, and something I love about all these scenes is that you're not really sure if Claire is justified or not for kicking out Bryan. I mean, we are to assume that he most likely sexually abused her, but how do we know that? We don't actually know what happened. They haven't actually told us, and I like that. So Jessica types as Daphne comes in, and of course, I was very interested in what was going to happen with Daphne, because of course her father, Chalmer did not agree to, I can't remember his name, but Chalmer, he did not agree to give the money to the company, and she didn't even approach him about it, so but then Daphne comes in, tells her to listen to, and she says she's got the 250K and her father's account will wire today. And I'm like, she doesn't have it. She's lying to Jessica. And Jessica says relief, and does make more sense in the next episode, which I have started, episode 5. I'll get into that. But she says her father made clear it's supposed to be a one-time anonymous gift. She gives her a routing number, and Jessica asks if there was anything else. She says she just saved all the rest, and a thank you would be nice. And Jessica basically fakes it, and she congratulates her on being soloist. You can understand why they're not gonna say thank you, because this was something they demanded for her to do. She didn't offer to do this. They asked her to do this, and she's just doing what was required of her. Yes, a thank you would be nice, but they're in such dreadful times. I can understand why she didn't say thank you. So she says, she would have been promoted next season. She damn well knows it. She says she's probably right, although they will never know. So at rehearsal, Mia seems to have some real problems with her back and wrists. I mean, they're really, hurting her, and we don't know what this is from. We find out more in the 5th episode. I'll say that right now, which I will be reviewing probably today as well. And, Trey tells them that he's not a gossip, but his friends Emil and Dex said that when Tony worked with them, she made the whole company rehearse Don Quixote in the nude. They say that Tony told them to wear shoes, and basically, Mia says she's sick of selling ribbons. She is a seamstress, and Trey asks what it's in for him. She says she'll get him a cocktail. He agrees to work on it, and Trey actually has a lot to do in this episode. I was worried that Trey was getting very underutilized, but no, he really gets some really great stuff in this episode. Kira takes a pill. Tony comes in. She notices the gashes on Claire's hand. Claire is cutting herself. We see that in this scene. She's now cutting herself, probably because Bryan has come back. It's caused some of the, her lashing out to come back, and you can just see that Bryan is making her life very, is really making life difficult for her. So Tony asks if it hurts. Claire says it does a little. Tony says they will use her. She tells them they're going to use it all. And again, Tony's way of dancing, her just, her motives and things like that, are not what they're used to, and you really see that in this episode. So Paul opens the door, and drummers come in. I mean, this is the first time they've probably ever done a piece without, with not just a piano. They're doing a piece with drummers, and again, it's very eccentric, and it's a very weird style, but I like what Tony is doing. She hugs the drummer, who starts drumming. They dance to beat. She has him do some trust exercises. She says to show her the full movement, and she wants to see how deep they can go. They stop and they're all exhausted, and she asks when they're going to stop performing for her and stop dancing, and shows her how that well they move and starts showing her why. And she knows how well they move, but she needs to see why they're in this. Why are they involved in this? Why are they any better than other dancers? And she says, excuse me, she says that she needs artists, thinking, feeling human beings, not puppets or trained ponies. She says, fuck pretty, they're creating a piece about a young girl's journey from childhood to womanhood, from her innocence through her sexual awakenings to her self knowledge, and it demands authenticity and demands their courage because it demands their most human truth. And I really do agree what she's saying there. They need to not focus on the beauty of it all and actually really focus on the context, and that's really what she wants them to work on. Like I said, Tony's really constructing this like it is a musical theater piece, and I like seeing that. I mean, again, it's a different way of teaching, but I say if it works, it works. And it might not be working for them right now, but I think what she's doing is a good idea. So Paul then comes in and takes a seat. He says to not mind him, he's there. Tony says whether they know it or not, they're a part of everyone. There's a part of their body they have yet to discover, a fortress where they keep everything locked. She says she has to come to lay siege on that fortress because she demands that truth. They're going to find it and bring it into the light, and they will find it together, their truth and that dark secret they kept locked up inside their most sacred spaces, hidden themselves, especially from yourself. And I love this scene because you see Claire, of course, she has a lot of dark secrets that she's hiding, and that really applies well to Claire, who is obviously feeling very self conscious. She tells him to go over the combination again. Claire then goes in the bathroom, takes the pin out of her hair, presses it against her tongue, and like blood comes out. She then puts it right in her head. I'm not kidding you guys. She literally just takes the pin and drills it into her head and seems to kind of zone out. She's kind of in this trance, and then she realizes what she's doing and wipes her head. And again, I really feel this is her emotion towards Bryan really coming forward. I mean, clearly when Bryan comes home, it makes her get, feelings of wanting to cut herself, and that definitely is something that's very bad. So Romeo sees Bryan. You know how I said Romeo is very underused in the last episode? Not here. He has some fantastic scenes in this episode. Romeo sees Bryan, asks if he has permission to approach, and Bryan offers Romeo a cigarette, then puts inside his coat. Bryan asks why he won't smoke it, and Romeo says it's going to matter more later when it's the last one. On the last, he'll be the guy with the cigarettes, and all the other bastards will rightly be fucked. He hears the train, asks Bryan if he feels it, and Romeo says, some will say when a rumble comes to ground, opens up a black ton, reaches out, and bodies get pulled down, 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 swallowed whole, before they even know they're dead. And I love this scene here. What Romeo says to Bryan is really interesting. He asks what he calls it, and he says he knows better not to give it a name. By the way, I love Romeo's name for Bryan, Jim Joe. That's just great. I love it. I think that's hilarious because I just think that's really funny. So Bryan asks if he ever shuts up, and he apologizes. He says he's right about the world ending. Romeo says he was born by the foot breech birth. He's given to the sight and seeing of things, and he asks if he believes in that. And, Romeo is really a miracle baby. That's kind of why he looks at everything in such a positive way. And Bryan says he doesn't because he's not crazy, and Romeo says there's nothing wrong with him. He asks him if he says that to Claire a lot, and he says that to, he says that to Bryan in this episode, which I found very interesting. There obviously is a reason why he says that, and we don't know what that is yet. But he keeps saying that to both Bryan and Claire. So he asks him if he does dream, and basically he says last night he had a vision. Maybe there will be no warning, and maybe there won't be a sound. But he's seen folks, big ones, little ones, sitting on the side of the road, and there came a white light, and then heat, and then nothing. There's nothing left but heat and broken glass. And Bryan asks what he said, and Romeo asks when he's coming back, and Romeo says he forgot his shirt. And Bryan clearly is not interested in what Romeo has to say. He thinks he's annoying and he wants nothing to do with him. So Paul then watches Ross dance and tells him he's wrong, tells him to take off his shirt so he can see the line better. Ross does his ass and continues, and Paul again tells him he's wrong. Paul says maybe it doesn't matter to everyone as much as it once did, but personally he would hazard a guess that he knows exactly what he wanted. Ross says he's doing the choreography. He says he's not centered. Everything is over the right hip. So when he leaves the arabesque, he basically tells him that Tony is something despite her haircut or her disregard for technical precision, precision, and he thinks that she has a certain spirit that they need. And I like that Paul This is by far Paul's best episode because this is the first episode where I could actually take Paul as a character. I didn't see Paul as this guy that just freaks out over things. There are reasons why he does that, and I think they really showed that well in this episode. Ben Daniels especially, his best acting in the show by far is in this episode. He has some really great scenes in this one. Definitely. He then gets it right. Paul says they should try another, but Ross is told to go since he's given him a lot to work on, and I really like this scene, between Ross and Paul, because Paul asks what the others think of him, and he says he couldn't think. He says they think they like her fine, but she'll never have experience on his way with the company, and says everyone loves him, and he thanks him. He's glad to hear that he's loved because maybe he's not really feeling that lately. So, Sergey, who definitely plays a huge role in this episode and the next episode, he tells Claire that she's a beautiful woman and anyone can see that, but he does not feel the place and its lifestyle is for her. And as I predicted, Claire is planning on going to this strip club, which is called Anesthesia. That's interesting, the name for it, but basically, Claire says he can't know that. She says she is a ballerina, and he says he let Daphne dance here, who is a ballerina, same as her, and he says he doesn't even know what it is that she has, and he gives her money and asks if she needs it. He asks why she's there, and he says he doesn't enjoy refusing, but now he must ask her to leave, and she says if he wants to see her, she'll be dancing at the club on 44th, and he says he thinks they're better friends than that now, and she says she'd like to think so. And I really like this scene between them. You really see how Sergey is just looking out for her. He doesn't really think that she is meant for this. He thinks that she's better than this, but I really like this. So then we see Eduardo again, who we haven't seen since the first episode. He's with Paul, and I was thinking they were just going to disregard this, but they really do go back to in this episode, which I was happy about because I really like these scenes between Eduardo and Paul. They're really good stuff. Basically, Eduardo, they're watching Paul's old dancing videos, which I feel is something we did need to see. Obviously, Paul, you can tell, used to be a lot better here, and this is really the scene where I really started to like Paul as a character. And I'll tell you guys why, because we really see what he went through in this episode. He says he had so many bottles he didn't know which. He asked why he's never invited him before until now, and Paul says his treasures are trinkets, mementos of past lives, everything there is old except for him. He speaks Spanish, and Paul says he doesn't know what the fuck he's saying. I thought that was a very funny scene. He says he's saying he must have had every boy in the city fighting to get into those tights, and Paul says not all of them, but most. Eduardo asks what it's like to be beautiful like that, those beautiful face in the dark watching him, and Paul says it goes away. One night there's 1,000 people standing applause, calling your name, and the next you're lying on your face in the wings, gripping the place where your Achilles tendon used to be, and I mean, that really goes with any star that there is. I mean, they're popular for a while and then just fade out. A lot of that happens to any celebrity nowadays, and Paul clearly did go through that. He clearly used to be this big star, but he kind of just got under the radar and faded out, like other artists do, and it's really taken a toll on him. You really do see that. So they then forget, he says that they then forget you just like that, and Eduardo says he'd take it just for one night, just to feel the love. They can take it the next day, just so he can take the memory. And Paul says it's better he learns now that they're going to betray him, including, and of course, he says everyone. Eduardo says it's not true, and Paul says, accuse him of being an optimist, and he says the wine makes him sad and he doesn't like it, and Paul recalls a memory of what is most likely his parents, and basically he wanted attention from his parents and to please them, but he was shy and strange and probably gay and didn't even know that. I mean, there's clearly a lot of emotions that Paul was going through when he was little, and half of them he clearly could not comprehend, which, I mean, that's understandable. When you're young, you don't really know things yet, and he says that his mom then gave his dad a blue envelope, which is the only time Paul ever saw his dad smile. He then one day went to his dad's desk, took the envelope. He found a check of $76.31, and this is how he learned that the man and woman were not only not his parents, they were his foster parents paid to tolerate him, and clearly you can see that Paul's been through a lot, and I really like this. I have to say, I thought this was a really great scene. Eduardo asks if he's okay. He says he knows how to love him, and Paul says he doesn't believe in love. Eduardo says he wants to stay the night and they kiss, and basically Claire is at the strip club, and one of the dancers, Yasmin, lets her know the different types of dancers and what to expect from men and how to please them, while her daughter is sitting right next to her. I mean, seriously, she's sitting right next to her, and Yasmin is going all over this sexual stuff with her. It was actually pretty funny. I enjoyed seeing that overall. It's definitely something I liked. Definitely one of the highlights of the episode was the scene with Yasmin. Yasmin's called to dance, and she asks Claire if she's okay with her daughter, but then she tells her that she's not talking to her, and Bryan goes to the apartment, Mia opens the door, and I can see how this scene is going to be controversial. Of course, this episode hasn't aired yet, but I really do feel that this scene is going to be very controversial, and I can clearly understand that. I mean, I think they portrayed this scene very, very well, but I can understand some people think they might have went a bit overboard here. Mia opens the door. He asks where Claire is, and Mia says she doesn't know. She says she doesn't even know why he cares, and he says she's his sister. She asks if he ever thinks that word means more to him than it does to her, and she says she's got him on a string like everyone else. He's known 100 others like her that are fake little princesses walking around like they're God's gift, playing all shy and vulnerable, just so guys like him wait all night by the fucking window, and she tells him to tell her she's wrong because she's seen how Claire treats him, like he's the problem, like he's some disease she's got to hide. She doesn't see anything wrong really with Bryan, because she doesn't really know what Claire's been through, obviously. She hasn't had that experience, but after this episode, you can definitely tell that fades away very quickly. So, she says she should be taking care of him. Someone should after everything he's been through, though she doesn't know what it is. She knows he did some hard things and maybe hurt some people. And he talks about how he might have and asks why and if it turns her on. She says he had in the heat of battle, and he says it can get really confusing. And he tells about a war memory, but he didn't hear the missile, and he says nothing feels like the way they say it's gonna feel. He didn't feel sad or afraid. He was excited, and he takes off her robe and says he felt excited like his skin was electric, and he loved that feeling when you're so close to life and death all at once. Explains his favorite parts of the war, his favorite being the night raids because of the excitement. And then we get to this scene. He ties her feet together, then basically ties her over, and ties all over, and ties her up around her mouth, puts the robe around her mouth, and he then jerks off to her, leaves her tied up and violated. And I really did feel bad for Mia. Obviously, she fell for his tricks. She thought that Bryan was an okay man. She didn't really think there was anything wrong with him, when clearly there was. And not only did he make her know that, he completely violated her, and I really felt bad for Mia in this scene. Really good acting, though, I have to say, from the actress that plays Mia. I can't think of her name right now, but she really did a great job in the scene. Emily Tyra, I think her name is Emily Tyra. She really did an amazing job in this scene. I thought she really handled it very well. You're really seeing that Bryan is a monster. He really is. I mean, while he may seem like this guy that is pretty civilized, he really has this big monster under him, and it's very interesting to see, and I really like that. So Claire then strips as she once again feels like she's in a trance, but before she strips, she's approached by this man named Cameron, and this guy is awesome. I love his character. He also happened to the girl in the jeans, and she asks what he's talking about. He says he couldn't forget her face, it's her, but now she's different, and he likes her innocence. He doesn't want her to be the stripper. She asks if he's disappointed. He says he's confused in a good way, and asks who she is and what she's doing here. She asks what he's doing here. He says he came last night with some guys from work, who saw her up on stage, and she had an effect on him. He tells her to have a seat, and she says she's supposed to dance for him. He says he really doesn't want to do that. He doesn't really do strip clubs. They're not really his thing. And asks if they could talk, and she says it's pretty expensive. He says to let him worry about it. Hands her a wine glass, and I really like this scene between Cameron and Claire. Claire's finally going to have a man that's not going to violate her. This guy seems legit, and it really seems like he cares about her. And that sticks with the 5th episode as well. It still seems like Cameron cares about her. So Bryan goes outside to smoke and then sees Claire, and she asks him what the fuck is wrong with him. He says not to be mad. Obviously, she wanted him gone, so she was expecting him to leave. He says to not be mad. She says she doesn't want him here, and he says he needed to see her and doesn't know how it's a bad thing, and she tells him to go. He asks what the fuck he's supposed to do now. He says their whole life it has just been them, always. So she is to tell him who he is supposed to be, and she says she doesn't know. He asks if he wants to go back home and take care of their dad, and if that is going to be his life now. And I honestly did feel bad for Bryan here because, he really has nothing. I mean, we realize in this scene he has no money, no job, and the Marines kicked him out, which Claire was not aware of. And he says she doesn't care, and she actually has a life. And I feel like even though Bryan, obviously sexually violated her, definitely, I think he does care about her overall and really wants her to hear him out. I mean, he clearly has gone through a lot, and that's something I really like with Bryan. He's just a very interesting character. You really shouldn't like him, but I do kind of feel bad for him in this scene. And basically, he asks if she's just going to send him away, like he's just some stranger, never mind that he's her flesh and blood, and says to look at him. She gives him money, and he asks what it's for. It's $800, and he says he doesn't want the money. She says to take it, tells her he got something for her, and that's a book, and she says she doesn't want it. He says she likes books, he knows that, she does, and she's not even going to look at it, and she tells him that she has a boyfriend, and that gets him to throw away the book, and obviously he is really upset, which she doesn't, but that was really the only way to get Bryan to get away from her, because obviously he has feelings for her, and I feel like he's kind of confused by his feelings. Like, he sees her as a sister, but he also sees her as more than that, and he really doesn't know how to comprehend it. And I think it definitely is very interesting. So, Tony sees Claire, says she knows she's been struggling with the piece, but she thinks she's making progress now. She says she knows who she is, and it's just not how she's used to moving. She doesn't have a lot of experience with partners. And Tony says it's not about her dancing. She just wants to know that if she needs someone to talk to, and she thinks of her concern, says she's fine, she'll get it, and basically, Paul then watches Daphne practice dancing with Trey and Kira with Ross. And Kira asks what's with him today. Paul says he can't put his finger on it, but Ross is just not living it for him. And he tells Trey to step in. He thinks Trey would be better in this part. And Paul tells them to go over it again. Ross walks out. And I think this really, again, shows that you'll just get replaced like that. Again, you're just sort of just another person to them. They don't care about your feelings. Paul doesn't care about their feelings because he's trying to make money. He cares about money makers. He cares about making stars. And Paul is, Trey just seems better at what he wants to do than Ross is. And definitely very interesting stuff between Trey and Ross. And I really like the way they set this up. I mean, Trey and Ross have been two characters that haven't a lot to do. And finally in this episode, they have a lot to do, which I like seeing. So Paul tells him to go over it again. Ross walks out, and Tony goes over to Paul and asks if he got her messages, and she says he's avoiding her. He says, why would he avoid her when he loves her? And that makes no sense, but his schedule is killing him, and she says they need to talk about Claire. She needs warriors, actual sexual human adults, and not a frigid small-town virgin, so that she can't do anything with. She doesn't want to work with Claire because Claire is just too innocent. She doesn't like the vibe that she's giving off. He says to give her a chance. She's young. She says she's scared. She says she needs to push her, and if she breaks, Paul says she needs to understand that everyone responds to her ways of teaching. Not there's anything wrong with that. It's great. She's a genius. But he thinks once she had a bit more experience, she'll learn that sometimes artists have to be handled with a certain nuance, a certain delicacy. She agrees and says that it's his problem, basically. But I do agree. I mean, obviously, they are not very fond of what she's teaching. Claire, I don't think that has to do with her at all, really. I don't think Claire's upset about that. But it could actually go with that, because I can understand why Claire would be upset. I can understand what Paul's trying to say, and that definitely is interesting. So Bryan then asks for a ticket back to Pittsburgh, gives the money to the woman, but then realizes that Claire gave him fake money. And I don't think Claire realizes this, but she did give him fake money. The money that she had wasn't real, and basically he's been played. So now he has no money, and he has no way of getting home, and his sister wants nothing to do with him. So Paul gets a message, talks to Claire. He asks her what her problem is, and that Tony says she's not cutting it, acting like it's like a 50s housewife. And of course, that was very interesting between Paul and Claire, because the last time he saw her, obviously, was not on good terms. And I like how Paul realized she needs to move past this, because, she's the star here. She's going to be the star of this ballet. He can't be angry at her and asks what her malfunction is that causes this Bambi thing has got to stop. She says she's working as hard as she can, and Paul says that's bullshit. He asks if she's frigid and asks her if she's afraid of nude men, and says nothing more, nothing less. It's just a body part, not a boogeyman. And he gets up and basically shows her his dick. I mean, it was a very interesting scene. And again, I can understand people thought this scene was a bit ridiculous, but I think he handled it in a good way. I mean, obviously, she's afraid of nude men. This is a business where you can't be afraid, really, of things like that. You have to get used to that. And again, this is clearly something that Claire has not dealt with. And she says she needs to start screwing with someone other than his livelihood. And she thinks of Cameron and the conversation they had. Bryan then goes to the strip club as Claire's on a date with Cameron. Now, I know some people are like, why would he follow Claire to the strip club? Keep in mind, guys, he's not there for Claire. Claire told him to leave. He's simply just here because he has nowhere to go, and he probably just thinks he can get his sexual frustration out here, because he clearly has a lot of it. So Claire's in it with Cameron. She climbs on top of him and lets him touch her. He says he guesses they're done with the talking. Bryan goes to the private dancers. The man tells him that nobody can come back there without a floor manager and a credit card, and he asks if he's okay. He says he had too much to drink. He then gets into a fight with the man as Bryan finds Claire there, asks her what she's doing and who she's with, and if he touched her. And security grabs him. Sergey comes out. They escort Bryan out, and Sergey apologizes and says to accept champagne in every room. And Cameron asks if she knows who that was, and Claire says she, pretends that she doesn't, obviously. She doesn't want to look like a fool. So she says she needs a minute to freshen up and tells him to wait there, and I really love this scene. I mean, this final scene was really crazy. You don't know what's going to happen here. I honestly thought Bryan was going to die in this scene. That's what I thought they were going to do here. But Bryan is thrown out. They tell him if he comes back, they're going to have a problem. Bryan continues to punch them out as they warn him not to do so. Claire comes out and tells them this is her problem. Bryan is bloodied and battered. He's throwing up blood. I mean, he's in really bad conditions. He's got like all kinds of gashes across his forehead. But despite that, she wants them to do more. Mainly because this is what she wants to do to him. She wants to hurt him. She wants him to feel pain because he hasn't felt it yet. And she says yes. Wipes the blood off of her, makes out with Cameron, starts to take off her clothes, but then starts breaking down, and that's basically how the episode ends. And I thought that was a fantastic ending. One, because you can definitely tell that she's starting to get a lot more confident with Cameron. He's really making, he's the first guy that's really approached her in this way where he actually does want to date her. He doesn't just want to have sex with her. And while I think he does eventually want to get to that, he cares more about her than he does about her body. And I like seeing that, definitely. It's very rare for Claire to meet someone like that, clearly. But I think she's also just, listening to Paul's advice. She wants to get more confident. You can tell that she's getting that confidence, and I really like seeing that. But there also is a lot more to talk about. First of all, what's going to happen with Bryan? Obviously, Bryan was escorted out. We don't know what's going to happen if he leaves, what's going to happen there. Will Mia tell Claire what Bryan did to her? Obviously, this really scared her. I mean, you have to think that she's going to be probably scarred from this, and I don't really know what Mia's going to do. Obviously, she trusted Bryan, and I feel she is going to apologize to Claire, but we'll have to see what happens with that. That's going to be interesting. Daphne. How did Daphne get this money? Okay, I did watch episode 5, so I won't tell you guys how. I know how, but how did she get this money? What happened with that? We'll have to figure out what's going on there, but somehow she was able to get this money that her father didn't give her, and there's someone else that gave it to her. So who it was, we'll find out in the next episode. Cameron, I actually really like. I hope him and Claire get closer. I really like these two, and I hope that for Claire's sake, this man turns out to be as good as he seems, because of course, we thought that Brousseau was okay, and then we know what happened between him and Claire, and basically we'll see what happens with Cameron. I hope to God he's a good guy, because he seems like a good guy. Tony. I like the advice that Paul gave to Claire about working with Tony. We'll have to see how that works out overall. Claire is cutting herself, but I do feel like she's trying to put that away and express it more into dancing. Now, this whole Ross and Trey situation, this is going to definitely be a huge problem because obviously Ross is upset that Trey was put in the ballet over him. It's not that I think, Ross is incapable. I think it just Trey is better at the role, and Ross really needs to understand that, and I don't think he does. We'll have to see really what happens with that because that's going to be very interesting. I like the scene between Paul and Eduardo. I think it's a really powerful scene. One of my favorite scenes in the show probably so far. I definitely really liked it. Romeo seems like he's trying to warn Bryan. Like, it really seems like he's giving him this warning. I don't really know what the warning's about, but it's clear that whatever Romeo was talking about was definitely a warning to Bryan, and I don't really know what it was, but that definitely was a warning, and we'll have to see what happens with that. Also, what's going on with Mia? Clearly, Mia has a lot of problems. She's constantly scratching herself. She's feeling pains. I mean, what's going on with her? Now, again, we do find out what's going on with her in the 5th episode. I'm not going to reveal it. I think it's really cool what they do, but I won't tell you what it is. Kira really had nothing to do in this episode, which was fine. You don't have to ever do something in every episode. But also, how do you think they're going to react to Tony's change? Obviously, I think they're getting used to it, but it still is different for them. I mean, obviously, she's very good at what she does. And obviously, the actress playing Tony is doing a phenomenal job. She really plays that eccentric role very, very well, and she does a very good job of that. I think we all know someone like that might do something that deviates away from the choreography or the performance or whatever we do a lot. And I think they definitely showed that very well here. I definitely really loved everything that happened with those scenes. They were really great. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. Like I said, I thought this was the best episode of the season. Really, really solid stuff. I definitely really loved this episode. And we have 4 episodes left, guys. I can't believe it either. But yeah, we have 4 episodes left, and I'm going to get this done by the weekend. That's the goal, is to get this done by the weekend, which I think I can. If I, stay up to date with it like I am, I think I can get this done by the weekend. I'm already in, 23 minutes of, the 5th episode, so I just gotta watch that, then I can review that to you guys, and review episode 6. I think I'm gonna get through this pretty quickly. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Like I said, I think this was the best episode of the season. Also, I forgot to say, the dancing scenes are really compelling. They do a good way of kind of putting you in what's like Claire's dream world. She kind of goes into a trance every time she dances. It feels like you're in this drug trip with her. They handled that very, very well. The cinematography as a whole was really great in this episode. And the way they handle that, I definitely really like. And the way they're just revealing more and more about the characters, I really like. I also want to talk about Bryan. What's going on with him? I mean, clearly there's something that happened and how he says he might have killed someone. Did he kill his mother? I mean, again, we know that Claire's mother did not leave. She was not sick and she did not die. She did not leave them, but she did, and she didn't die either. So what could have happened to her? We don't really know. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. Like I said, best episode of the season. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Arrow, and I will see you guys for that. So, okay, bye.